Bear cub was trapped in a flooded cave. What this baby did was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. Rain pounded against the windows of the small cabin nestled deep in the pine forests of Whispering Pines. Olivia Reed gazed out at the darkening sky, cradling her 10-month-old daughter Luna, who babbled happily despite the storm raging outside. The cabin creaked and groaned under the assault of the wind, but inside, the crackling fireplace kept the little family warm and safe. 3 days of non-stop rain. Olivia's husband Theo sighed as he placed another log on the fire. The creek must be overflowing by now. Luna squirmed in her mother's arms, her bright blue eyes fixed on the window where raindrops raced down the glass. She pointed a chubby finger toward the forest and made excited noises, as if trying to tell her parents something important. "What is it, sweetheart?" Olivia asked, brushing back Luna's wispy blonde curls. "Do you see something out there?" Beyond their cozy cabin, through the curtain of rain and the dense wall of pines, a mother bear trudged through the mud with her 2 cubs following closely behind. The larger cub stayed right on his mother's heels, but the smaller one, a curious little female with a patch of white fur on her chest, kept getting distracted by the new smells the rain had brought out. The mother bear grunted, calling her cubs to stay close. The forest was dangerous during storms. Trees could fall, the normally gentle creek could become a raging torrent, and the network of caves that dotted the hillside could quickly flood. But the little female cub, whom we'll call Star for her white chest patch, lagged behind, sniffing at a cluster of mushrooms that had sprouted overnight. When Star looked up, her mother and brother had disappeared around a bend in the path. She let out a distressed whine and hurried to catch up, but in her panic she took a wrong turn. Instead of following the familiar trail, she found herself climbing up the rocky hillside where the caves were. The rain made the rock slippery, and Star's paws slid on the wet surface. She whimpered softly, her ears flattening against her head as thunder rumbled overhead. Seeking shelter from the storm, she spotted a small opening between the rocks, the entrance to one of the many caves that honeycombed the hillside. Star hesitated at the entrance, her nose twitching as she sniffed the air. The cave smelled of damp earth and minerals, but there was no scent of other animals. It seemed safe. She waddled inside, her tiny claws clicking against the stone floor. The cave narrowed as she moved deeper, but there was enough room for her to walk comfortably. Water dripped from the ceiling, forming small puddles that Star lapped at curiously. She continued exploring, unaware that outside the rain was intensifying, and the creek at the bottom of the hill was rising rapidly. Back at the cabin, Luna had fallen asleep in Olivia's arms, her breathing soft and even. But her sleep was restless, her tiny brow furrowed as if she were worried about something. "She's probably just dreaming," Theo said, noticing his daughter's troubled expression. "The storm must be affecting her." Olivia nodded, but something about Luna's behavior made her uneasy. Even while sleeping, Luna's head kept turning toward the window, toward the forest and the hills beyond. Meanwhile, Star had ventured deep into the cave, following the sound of water. The cave opened into a larger chamber with a ceiling so high she couldn't see it in the darkness. The floor sloped downward, and at the bottom, a small underground stream flowed gently. Star dipped her paw into the cool water, watching the ripples spread outward. She was so engrossed in her discovery that she didn't notice the water level slowly rising around her paws. Nor did she hear the distant rumble of rocks shifting at the cave's entrance. It wasn't until a loud crash echoed through the cave that Star looked up in alarm. The entrance through which she had come was now blocked by fallen rocks, and water was beginning to seep in from underneath the blockage. The little cub let out a frightened cry, scrambling up the slope toward the blocked entrance. She pawed at the rocks, trying to shift them, but they were too heavy. The water continued to rise, now reaching her belly. Star's cries grew more desperate, echoing through the cave and out through small cracks in the rock pile. Outside, the mother bear had realized her cub was missing. She roared with distress, retracing her steps with her remaining cub close behind. But the rain had washed away Star's scent, making it difficult to track her. In the cabin, Luna suddenly woke with a start, her eyes wide and alert. She began to cry, not her usual hungry or tired cry, but something different, more urgent. Olivia tried to comfort her, but Luna twisted in her arms, pointing insistently toward the window, toward the hillside. "What's wrong, Luna?" Olivia asked, growing concerned by her daughter's unusual behavior. "Are you not feeling well?" Luna continued crying, her little face red with the effort. When Olivia carried her away from the window, she cried harder, reaching back toward it with both hands. "Maybe she needs some fresh air," Theo suggested. "The storm seems to be letting up a bit." It was true. The rain had slowed to a gentle patter, though dark clouds still hung low over the forest. Olivia wrapped Luna in a warm blanket and stepped onto the cabin's covered porch. The moment they were outside, Luna's cries stopped. She hiccuped softly, then pointed toward the hillside, making an insistent "ah, ah" sound. Olivia looked in the direction Luna was pointing, but saw nothing unusual, just the rain-soaked forest and the rocky hillside beyond. Yet something about her daughter's behavior made her pause. Luna had never acted this way before. "Theo," she called back into the cabin, "I think something's wrong." Luna keeps pointing at the hillside. Theo joined them on the porch, his brow furrowed with concern. "What do you think it is?" Olivia shook her head. "I don't know, but she seems really upset about it." As if to confirm her mother's words, Luna began squirming again, leaning forward so far that Olivia had to tighten her grip to keep from dropping her. "Should we go check it out?" Theo asked hesitantly. Olivia bit her lip, torn between dismissing her baby's behavior as a strange whim and taking it seriously. "It sounds crazy, but yes, I think we should. Can you get the flashlights?" Theo nodded and disappeared back into the cabin. When he returned, he had 2 powerful flashlights, their rain jackets, and sturdy boots. "If we're going to check, we might as well be prepared," he said with a small smile. They dressed quickly, bundling Luna in waterproof clothing as well. The baby had calmed somewhat now that her parents seemed to be responding to her distress, but she kept her eyes fixed on the hillside, occasionally pointing and making soft noises. Together, the family stepped off the porch and into the damp forest. The ground was soggy underfoot, and small rivulets of water still flowed down the gentle slope toward the creek, which had swollen to twice its normal size. Guided by Luna's persistent pointing, they made their way toward the hillside. As they got closer, Olivia began to hear something, a faint, high-pitched cry that seemed to be coming from somewhere among the rocks. "Do you hear that?" she asked Theo, pausing to listen more carefully. Theo stopped, tilting his head. "I think so." "What is it?" "I'm not sure," Olivia replied. "But it sounds like an animal in distress." Luna, hearing the cries more clearly now, began to bounce in her mother's arms, pointing with renewed urgency. Her eyes were wide, and she made soft cooing sounds as if trying to answer the cries. They continued forward, moving carefully over the slippery ground. As they approached the hillside, the cries became more distinct. the frightened whimpers of a young animal. "It's coming from up there," Theo said, pointing to a pile of rocks halfway up the slope. "I think there might have been a landslide." Olivia's heart sank as she realized what might have happened. There are caves in these hills. If an animal was inside when the rocks fell. She didn't need to finish the thought. If the caves were flooding from the rain, any creature trapped inside would be in serious danger. Luna squirmed in her mother's arms, reaching toward the sound with surprising strength. Her face was set in a determined expression that looked almost comical on her baby features, but there was nothing funny about the situation. "We need to help," Olivia said firmly. "Whatever's in there, it's suffering." Theo nodded, already starting to climb the slope. "Be careful with Luna. The ground is really unstable." Olivia followed more slowly, making sure each step was secure before putting her weight down. Luna had gone quiet, as if sensing the need for concentration, but her eyes remained fixed on their destination. When they reached the pile of rocks, the cries were much louder, punctuated by scratching sounds as if the animal was trying to dig its way out. Theo shone his flashlight into the cracks between the rocks, but couldn't see anything. "Hello?" he called softly. "Anyone in there?" The scratching stopped briefly, then resumed with greater intensity. A high-pitched whine echoed through the rocks. "It sounds like a bear cub," Olivia whispered, her eyes widening with realization. "Theo, if there's a cub in there, the mother must be nearby." They both instinctively looked around, scanning the forest below for any sign of an adult bear. The rain had stopped completely now, and in the growing silence they could hear the rush of the swollen creek and the drip of water from the trees, but no sounds of a large animal moving through the underbrush. "We need to be careful," Theo said, "but we can't just leave it. The water level is still rising." He was right. Even as they watched, a trickle of water seeped out from under the rock pile, a clear sign that the cave behind it was flooding. Luna suddenly let out a string of babbling sounds, louder than before, and pointed emphatically at the rocks. To Olivia's amazement, the whimpering inside the cave changed in response, becoming more rhythmic, almost like an answer to Luna's baby talk. "Did you hear that?" Olivia gasped. "It's like they're communicating." Theo looked equally surprised. "That's unusual." Luna continued her babbling, and each time she paused, the creature inside would respond. It was as if they were having a conversation, though neither was using real words. "Maybe we can use this," Theo said thoughtfully. "If the cub is responding to Luna, it might stay calm while we try to clear the rocks." Olivia nodded, though she was still trying to process the strange connection between her baby and the trapped animal. "Just be careful. Some of those rocks look heavy." Theo began to carefully remove rocks from the pile, starting with the smaller ones at the top to avoid causing another collapse. Olivia stood a few feet away with Luna, who continued her conversation with the trapped cub. As Theo worked, water continued to seep out from under the rocks, now forming a steady stream. Whatever was in there didn't have much time. "I think I'm making progress," Theo grunted, lifting a particularly large stone and setting it aside. "I can feel air coming through the gap now." Olivia stepped closer, shining her flashlight into the small opening Theo had created. A pair of frightened brown eyes blinked back at them, and a tiny black nose pressed against the gap, sniffing anxiously. "It is a bear cub," she whispered. "A small one." Luna let out an excited squeal and reached toward the opening. The cub inside responded with a similar sound, pawing at the remaining rocks. "We need to hurry," Theo said, working faster now. "The water's still rising in there." He removed several more rocks, widening the opening. Now they could see more of the cub, its wet fur plastered to its small body, a distinctive white patch visible on its chest. It looked exhausted and frightened, but at the sight of them it seemed to gather new energy, scratching at the opening with renewed vigor. Just as Theo was about to remove another rock, a deep, rumbling growl froze them in place. Slowly, they turned to look down the hillside. There, at the bottom of the slope, stood a large female bear with a cub by her side. Her eyes were fixed on them, her teeth bared in a silent warning. She took a step forward, her powerful muscles tensing under her thick fur. "Don't move," Theo whispered, his voice barely audible. "Don't make any sudden movements." Luna, however, seemed oblivious to the danger. She let out a happy gurgle and pointed at the mother bear, then back at the rocks, as if trying to explain the situation. The mother bear paused, her head tilting slightly as she watched the strange interaction. The cub at her side whimpered softly, perhaps recognizing the sounds coming from the cave as belonging to its sibling. To Olivia's astonishment, Luna then did something completely unexpected. She began to make a rhythmic humming sound, rocking slightly in her mother's arms. It was a sound Olivia recognized. Luna often made it when she was content or trying to comfort herself. The trapped cub inside the cave immediately echoed the sound, creating an eerie harmony. And then, even more surprisingly, the mother bear's growl softened into a similar rumble. "What's happening?" Theo whispered, frozen in place with his hands still on the rocks. "I think—" Olivia swallowed hard, hardly believing what she was seeing. "I think Luna is somehow mediating between them, like she's telling the mother bear we're trying to help." It seemed impossible, this wordless communication between a human baby and wild bears, yet the evidence was right before their eyes. The mother bear's aggressive stance had relaxed slightly, though she remained alert, her eyes never leaving them. "Should I keep going?" Theo asked, nodding toward the remaining rocks. Olivia looked at the mother bear, then at Luna, who was still making that strange humming sound. "Yes," she finally said, slowly. Theo nodded and carefully resumed removing rocks from the opening. The mother bear watched intently, but made no move to charge up the hillside. Her cub stayed pressed against her side, occasionally whimpering in response to the sounds from the cave. Water was flowing more steadily from under the remaining rocks now, a clear sign that the situation inside the cave was becoming desperate. Theo worked as quickly as he dared, acutely aware of the mother bear's gaze on his every move. Finally, he removed enough rocks to create an opening large enough for the trapped cub to squeeze through. They stepped back, giving it space. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a small, wet head appeared in the opening, blinking in the fading daylight. The cub hesitated, clearly exhausted and frightened. Luna let out an encouraging coo, reaching toward the cub as if beckoning it forward. At the bottom of the hill, the mother bear made a soft grunting sound that seemed to echo Luna's encouragement. Slowly, the cub dragged itself through the opening. Its fur was soaked, and it was shivering visibly. But it was alive. It stumbled forward a few steps, then collapsed on the wet ground, too weak to go farther. The mother bear let out a distressed groan, but still didn't charge. It was as if she understood that her cub needed help that she couldn't provide from a distance, yet she was torn between rescuing her young and protecting it from the humans. Luna squirmed in Olivia's arms, making it clear she wanted to be put down. Olivia hesitated, looking at her husband in panic. "Theo, she wants to go to the cub," she whispered urgently. "That's too dangerous," Theo replied, his voice tight with fear. The mother could charge at any moment. But Luna was insistent, leaning so far forward that Olivia was struggling to hold her. And strangely, the mother bear wasn't showing any signs of aggression. She was watching, waiting, as if to see what would happen next. "I don't think she's going to hurt them," Olivia said slowly, hardly believing her own words. "It's like she knows Luna helped save her cub." Theo shook his head, looking terrified. "Olivia, we can't risk it. Bears are wild animals, they're unpredictable." Olivia bit her lip, torn between her maternal instinct to protect her child and the strange certainty growing within her that this situation was different, that something extraordinary was happening here. Before she could decide, Luna gave a mighty squirm and slipped from her grasp. Olivia's heart leaped into her throat as her baby plopped onto the muddy ground and began to crawl determinedly toward the exhausted bear cub. "Luna!" Theo gasped, moving to grab her, but Olivia caught his arm. "Wait," she said softly, her eyes fixed on the mother bear. "Just wait." The large bear was watching Luna's approach with intense interest, but there was no aggression in her posture now. Her remaining cub peeked out from behind her leg, equally curious about this strange little human that moved in such a similar way to itself. Luna reached the exhausted cub and did something that made both parents hold their breath. She placed her tiny hand on the cub's wet fur and patted it gently, just as she would pat their dog at home when he was sleeping. The cub lifted its head weakly, its brown eyes meeting Luna's blue ones. There was a moment of silent connection, a wordless understanding that transcended species. The cub made a soft whimpering sound, and Luna responded with her rhythmic hum. Then, to everyone's amazement, the mother bear began to move. Not charging up the hill as they had feared, but slowly, cautiously making her way toward the two babies. Her remaining cub followed close behind, mirroring its mother's careful steps. Olivia and Theo stood frozen, torn between the instinct to snatch Luna away and the growing sense that they were witnessing something miraculous. The mother bear approached her exhausted cub first, sniffing it all over as if checking for injuries. The cub stirred, making a weak sound of recognition. Then the mother bear turned her attention to Luna, who sat calmly in the mud, apparently unafraid of the massive creature towering over her. The bear lowered her head until her nose was just inches from Luna's face. She sniffed deeply, taking in the baby's scent. Luna reached out a muddy hand and touched the bear's nose, leaving a tiny smudge of dirt. Then she giggled, a pure, joyful sound that echoed across the hillside. The bear pulled back slightly at the unexpected noise, but didn't retreat. Instead, she made a soft rumbling sound deep in her chest, not a growl, but something gentler. Her second cub crept forward curiously, coming to stand beside Luna. The two babies regarded each other with innocent wonder. Olivia felt tears streaming down her face as she watched this impossible scene unfold. Beside her, Theo's expression had transformed from terror to awe. "How is this happening?" he whispered. "It's like something out of a fairy tale." Olivia shook her head, words failing her. There was no logical explanation for what they were witnessing. A wild bear allowing her cubs to interact with a human baby, the strange communication between Luna and the animals, the complete absence of fear on both sides. The mother bear nudged her weakened cub with her nose, encouraging it to stand. The cub struggled to its feet, still wobbly but looking stronger already. Luna clapped her hands in apparent approval, and the cub made a soft sound in response. Then the mother bear did something truly astonishing. She gently picked up her exhausted cub by the scruff of its neck, the way mother cats carry kittens. But instead of immediately retreating down the hill with both her cubs, she stood watching Luna for a long moment, as if memorizing her. Luna reached out one last time, her fingers stopping just short of touching the mother bear's fur. The bear dipped her head slightly, allowing the brief contact, then stepped back. Her second cub followed, after a final curious look at the strange little human that moved and sounded so much like itself. With both her cubs now safe, the mother bear turned and made her way down the hillside. At the edge of the forest, she paused and looked back, her intelligent eyes meeting Olivia's. There was something in that gaze that Olivia couldn't quite define, a kind of acknowledgement, perhaps, or gratitude. Then the bear disappeared into the trees, her cubs trotting alongside her. Olivia rushed forward and scooped Luna into her arms, hugging her tightly. "You amazing, incredible little girl," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "How did you know? How did you do that?" Luna simply smiled up at her mother, her blue eyes bright with an innocent wisdom that Olivia couldn't begin to comprehend. Whatever connection had allowed her to communicate with the bears, to bridge the gap between human and wild animal, was as natural to her as breathing. Theo joined them, wrapping his arms around both his wife and daughter. "I would never have believed it if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes," he said, his voice filled with wonder. "Our daughter just saved a bear cub's life, and the mother bear knew it," Olivia added softly. She understood. They stood there for a long moment, holding each other as the last light faded from the sky. The storm had passed completely now, leaving behind a world washed clean, where for a brief, magical moment, the barriers between human and animal had dissolved. As they made their way back to their cabin, Luna fell asleep in her mother's arms, exhausted from the day's events. But there was a small smile on her face, as if she was dreaming of her new friends, the bears in the forest who would forever be connected to her in a way no one could explain. Olivia and Theo knew they would never forget what they had witnessed on that hillside. It was a reminder that there were still mysteries in the world, connections that defied rational explanation, and that sometimes the purest wisdom came from those who had not yet learned to speak with words. And somewhere in the forest, a mother bear curled protectively around her two cubs, one still damp from its ordeal in the flooded cave. Perhaps she too was contemplating the strange encounter, the tiny human with no fear, and a heart full of compassion who had somehow known that her cub needed help. In the quiet aftermath of the storm, a new understanding had been born, a reminder that kindness knows no language barriers, and that even the smallest among us can inspire moments of extraordinary connection. The family slept soundly that night, the cabin warm and secure against the lingering dampness outside. Luna didn't stir once, exhausted from her incredible encounter, but while her body rested, her dreams were vivid and alive with images of the forest, the cave, and the bears. In her sleep, tiny sounds escaped her lips, soft growls and gentle hums that echoed the communication she had shared with the wild creatures. Olivia woke several times during the night, drawn from sleep by the strange noises coming from Luna's crib. She would lean over, checking on her daughter, only to find her sleeping peacefully despite the unusual sounds. It was as if Luna was still talking to the bears in her dreams, maintaining that mysterious connection even in sleep. Morning came with brilliant sunshine that transformed the sodden forest into a glittering wonderland. Droplets of water hung from every leaf and needle, catching the light and scattering tiny rainbows across the ground. Theo stood on the porch, coffee mug in hand, surveying the changed landscape. "It's hard to believe what happened yesterday," he said as Olivia joined him, Luna perched on her hip. "If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes." "I know," Olivia replied softly. "I've been thinking about it all night. How did Luna know the cub was trapped? How did she communicate with the bears? None of it makes any sense." Luna, fully rested now, was back to her usual cheerful self. She bounced in her mother's arms, pointing eagerly toward the forest. Her eyes were bright with excitement, and she made insistent babbling sounds that clearly communicated her desire. "I think she wants to go back," Olivia said, a note of concern in her voice. "She wants to see the bears again." Theo frowned, his protective instincts surging. "That's not possible, Luna," he said gently, touching his daughter's cheek. "What happened yesterday was extraordinary. Magical, even. But bears are still wild animals, and it's not safe to seek them out." Luna's face crumpled in disappointment, and she let out a frustrated cry, pointing more insistently toward the trees. "Maybe we could just take a short walk," Olivia suggested, unable to bear her daughter's distress. "Not to look for the bears, just to enjoy the morning. The storm has passed, and the air will be fresh." Theo hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "All right, but we stay on the main path, away from the hillside, and at the first sign of any large wildlife, we turn back immediately." They dressed Luna in her tiny hiking clothes, miniature boots, waterproof pants, and a bright yellow jacket that made her look like a little sunbeam against the dark green of the forest. She clapped her hands excitedly as Theo strapped her into the baby carrier on his back, her perfect vantage point for observing the world around her. The forest was peaceful in the aftermath of the storm. Birds had returned to the branches and were singing exuberantly, as if celebrating their survival. Small animals rustled in the underbrush, and occasionally a squirrel would dart across the path, pausing to watch the humans with bright, curious eyes before disappearing again. Olivia walked slightly ahead, breathing deeply of the clean, pine-scented air. "It's beautiful out here," she called back to Theo. "I almost forgot how much I loved this place after being cooped up during the storm." Theo nodded, adjusting the straps of the baby carrier. Luna was being uncharacteristically quiet, her eyes scanning the forest intently, as if searching for something, or someone. Her little hands gripped Theo's shoulders tightly, and occasionally she would lean to one side or the other, trying to see deeper into the trees. They had been walking for about 20 minutes when Luna suddenly let out an excited squeal, bouncing so vigorously in the carrier that Theo had to reach back to steady her. "What is it, Luna?" he asked, turning to look over his shoulder at his daughter's animated face. Luna was pointing frantically off the path, toward a thick stand of pine trees. Her face was alight with recognition, and she made the same humming sound she had used during the encounter with the bears. Olivia froze, her eyes following Luna's pointing finger. "Theo," she whispered, "do you see something?" Theo squinted, trying to penetrate the shadows beneath the pines. For a moment, he saw nothing. Then a slight movement caught his eye, a shifting of darkness against darkness, too deliberate to be the wind. "There's something there," he confirmed, his voice low. "We should go back." But before they could turn, a small figure emerged from beneath the trees. It wasn't the mother bear they had expected, but one of her cubs, the one with the white patch on its chest, the one they had rescued from the flooded cave. Star, as they had privately named her. The cub stood at the edge of the forest, watching them with intelligent eyes. She looked much better than she had the day before. Her fur had dried into a fluffy coat, and she moved with energy and purpose. There was no sign of her mother or sibling. Luna let out a delighted cry, reaching toward the cub with both hands. The little bear responded with a soft whine, taking a cautious step toward the path. "Where's the mother?" Olivia whispered urgently, scanning the forest for the larger bear. "She wouldn't let her cub wander alone, would she?" Theo shook his head, equally confused. "I don't know. This isn't normal behavior for bears. Cubs stay with their mothers for at least 2 years. Star took another step forward, then stopped, as if waiting for something. Luna made her humming sound again, and the cub tilted its head, listening intently. "It's like they're communicating again," Olivia murmured, fascinated despite her fear. "What do you think she's saying?" "I have no idea," Theo replied, "but I don't think we should stick around to find out. If the mother is nearby and thinks we're threatening her cub—" He didn't need to finish the thought. Despite yesterday's miraculous interaction, they both knew how dangerous a protective mother bear could be. Theo began to slowly back away, trying not to make any sudden movements, but Star didn't retreat as they moved away. Instead, to their shock, she began to follow them, maintaining a careful distance but clearly intentional in her pursuit. Luna babbled happily, apparently delighted by this development. "Theo," Olivia hissed, "the cub is following us. What do we do?" "Keep walking," he replied tensely. "Maybe it will lose interest." They continued down the path, moving a little faster now, but Star kept pace, occasionally breaking into a trot to keep them in sight. It was as if she was escorting them, making sure they didn't lose their way. "This is beyond weird," Theo muttered. "I've never heard of a wild bear cub behaving like this." Luna, however, seemed completely unfazed by the unusual situation. She kept up a steady stream of babbling, punctuated by the humming sounds that seemed to hold special meaning for the cub. Star would respond with soft whines and grunts, creating an eerily coherent conversation. They had almost reached the clearing where their cabin stood when Olivia suddenly stopped, gasping in shock. "Theo, look!" He followed her gaze and felt his heart skip a beat. There, waiting at the edge of the clearing, was the mother bear. She sat on her haunches, her remaining cub playing around her massive paws, seemingly at ease despite her proximity to the human dwelling. "Don't move," Theo whispered, instinctively reaching back to protect Luna, though she was safely strapped to his back. She must have been tracking us the whole time, but the mother bear showed no signs of aggression. She watched them calmly, her eyes moving from them to her following cub and back again. There was an intelligence in her gaze that sent a shiver down Theo's spine, not of fear, but of awe. This was no ordinary wild animal encounter. Star, seeing her mother, bounded forward happily, joining her sibling in play. The mother bear nuzzled both cubs affectionately, then raised her head to look directly at the humans again. Luna was practically beside herself with excitement, squirming and reaching toward the bears with such determination that Theo had to tighten his grip on her legs to keep her secure. "What do we do now?" Olivia asked, her voice barely audible. "We need to get to the cabin, but we'll have to pass right by them." Theo considered their options. They could try to circle around through the woods, but that would mean leaving the path and potentially losing their way. They could wait and hope the bears would eventually leave, but there was no telling how long that might take. Or they could try to approach their home directly, passing near the bears but making no threatening moves. Before he could decide, Luna made the choice for them. She let out a loud musical call, a series of notes that rose and fell like a simple melody. It was unlike anything her parents had heard from her before, more complex than her usual baby sounds. The mother bear's ears perked up at the sound, and she let out a rumbling response. Both cubs stopped playing and looked toward Luna, their small heads tilted in identical poses of attention. "Did you hear that?" Olivia whispered, her eyes wide with astonishment. Luna just sang to them, and they understood. Theo nodded, beyond words. The strangeness of it all had pushed him past the point of disbelief into a kind of dazed acceptance. His baby daughter was communicating with wild bears in a language he couldn't begin to comprehend. Luna sang her simple song again, and this time the mother bear stood up. Both cubs immediately fell in line behind her as she began to walk, not away into the forest as Theo had hoped, but directly toward them. "Theo," Olivia gasped, grabbing his arm, "what do we do?" Stay still, he managed, his mouth dry with fear despite the previous day's peaceful encounter. Don't make any sudden movements. The mother bear approached at a deliberate pace, her eyes never leaving them. When she was about 10 feet away, close enough that they could see the individual hairs of her thick coat, could smell her wild, musky scent, she stopped. The cubs peeked out from behind her, their bright eyes fixed on Luna. Luna let out another musical call, and to the parents' amazement the mother bear sat down on the path, effectively blocking their way to the cabin, but in a non-threatening manner. It was as if she was insisting on a conversation. I think, Olivia began hesitantly, I think she wants something from us. But what? Theo asked, his voice strained. What could a wild bear possibly want from humans? The answer came in an unexpected form. The mother bear turned her head toward the forest, making a soft grunting sound. From the shadows beneath the trees, a third figure emerged. Another bear, but not a cub. This one was fully grown, though smaller than the mother. It moved with a pronounced limp, favoring its right front paw, which it held slightly off the ground. It's an adolescent, Theo whispered, recognizing the bear's size and proportions. Maybe 2 or 3 years old, and it's injured. The newcomer approached cautiously, clearly wary of the humans. The mother bear made encouraging sounds, coaxing it forward until it stood beside her. Now they could see the injury clearly. The bear's right paw was swollen and raw, with something embedded in the pad that glinted in the morning light. There's something stuck in its paw, Olivia said, her medical training kicking in. Before becoming a full-time mother, she had worked as a veterinary nurse. It looks like a piece of metal, maybe part of a trap. Luna made an urgent sound, leaning so far forward that Theo had to grip her legs tightly to keep her from tumbling out of the carrier. She pointed at the injured bear, then at Olivia, making the connection clear even without words. I think, Theo said slowly, the realization dawning on him, I think the mother bear brought this one to us, for help, like Luna helped save her cub yesterday. That's impossible, Olivia protested, but without conviction. After what they had witnessed the day before, the boundaries of impossible had shifted dramatically. Wild animals don't seek out humans for medical assistance. These aren't ordinary wild animals, Theo replied simply. And Luna isn't an ordinary baby. As if to confirm his words, Luna began her strange humming again, and the mother bear responded with a similar sound. The injured adolescent bear watched this exchange warily, clearly in pain, but trusting the older bear's judgment. I think you're right, Olivia said finally. I think they want our help. She took a deep breath, steeling herself. And I think I can help, if the bear will let me. Theo stared at her in disbelief. Olivia, you can't be serious. It's one thing to observe this, whatever this is between Luna and the bears. It's another thing entirely to approach an injured wild animal. I have my medical kit in the cabin, Olivia continued, as if she hadn't heard him. If it's just a piece of metal embedded in the pad, I might be able to remove it and clean the wound. Bears have remarkable healing abilities if the initial injury is treated. This is insane, Theo muttered, but he could see the determination in his wife's eyes. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the fear and disbelief, he felt a strange certainty that this was somehow meant to be, that their family had been chosen for this extraordinary encounter for a reason he couldn't yet understand. Luna seemed to sense her father's internal struggle. She patted his head gently, making soothing noises as if to reassure him that everything would be all right. The gesture was so human, so aware, that Theo felt a lump form in his throat. All right, he said finally. "But we do this carefully. I'll get your medical kit from the cabin. You and Luna stay here with the bears, since they seem comfortable with you." Olivia nodded, her expression a mixture of fear and determination. "Be quick," she said. "That wound needs attention, and I don't know how long the bear will tolerate our presence." Theo carefully unbuckled the baby carrier and handed Luna to Olivia. Their daughter immediately settled against her mother's chest, her eyes fixed on the bears with fascination rather than fear. Then Theo began to slowly edge around the group, giving the mother bear a wide berth as he made his way toward the cabin. The bears watched his movement, but made no aggressive moves. The mother seemed to understand that he was not leaving, merely fetching something. The cubs, growing bored with the waiting, began to play again, tumbling over each other in a wrestling match that looked both fierce and affectionate. Theo reached the cabin safely and rushed inside, his heart pounding. He found Olivia's medical kit in the bathroom, a comprehensive collection of supplies she had brought with her out of habit, never expecting to use them on wildlife. He grabbed it and hurried back outside, half expecting to find the bears gone and Olivia looking relieved at their departure. But the scene that greeted him was even more surreal than the one he had left. Olivia was sitting cross-legged on the ground, Luna in her lap. The injured adolescent bear had moved closer and was now sitting just a few feet away, its wounded paw extended slightly as if already offering it for treatment. The mother bear sat nearby, alert but calm, watching the proceedings with that same uncanny intelligence. "They're still here," Theo said unnecessarily as he approached, the medical kit clutched in his hands. Olivia nodded without taking her eyes off the bears. "Luna's been talking to them the whole time. I think she's explaining what we're going to do." Theo handed her the kit and crouched beside her, creating a small family unit that faced the bear family. The similarity wasn't lost on him. 2 adult humans with their young, meeting 2 adult bears with their young. A strange symmetry in this unprecedented encounter. "What's the plan?" he asked quietly. Olivia was already going through her kit, selecting the tools she would need. "I need to remove whatever's embedded in the paw, clean the wound, and apply antibiotics. Ideally, I'd bandage it too, but I'm not sure the bear would tolerate that." "And how exactly are you planning to do this without getting mauled?" Theo asked, his voice tight with concern. "That bear might be in pain, but it's still powerful enough to kill you with one swipe." "I know," Olivia admitted, "but look at them, Theo. They came to us for help. They trust us, or at least they trust Luna. I think if I move slowly and let them see everything I'm doing, it might work." Luna, as if understanding the gravity of the situation, was unusually still in her mother's lap. She watched the injured bear with solemn eyes, occasionally making soft, reassuring sounds when it shifted uncomfortably. "I'll hold Luna," Theo said, reaching for his daughter. "You focus on the bear." With Luna securely in his arms, Theo moved back slightly, giving Olivia room to work. She laid out her tools on a clean cloth: tweezers, antiseptic solution, gauze pads, antibiotic ointment. Then, moving with deliberate slowness, she began to approach the injured bear. "Hey there," she said softly, using the gentle voice she had once used with frightened animals at the veterinary clinic. "I'm going to help you, but you need to stay very still. Can you do that for me?" The bear regarded her warily, its dark eyes reflecting pain and uncertainty, but it didn't retreat as Olivia inched closer, and it kept its injured paw slightly extended. Luna began to hum again, the same rhythmic sound she had used before. The injured bear's eyes flickered to her, and some of the tension seemed to leave its massive body. The mother bear made a similar humming sound, as if adding her own encouragement. When Olivia was close enough to touch the bear, she paused, giving it time to adjust to her proximity. "I'm going to look at your paw now," she murmured, slowly reaching out. The bear flinched slightly as her fingers made contact with its fur, but it didn't pull away. Moving with extreme caution, Olivia lifted the massive paw into her lap, cradling it as she would a small dog's foot. The difference in scale was striking. The bear's paw was larger than her hand, the claws alone as long as her fingers. "I can see the problem," she said, her voice steady despite the thundering of her heart. "There's a metal fragment embedded deep in the pad. It looks like part of a hunter's trap, a spring mechanism that's broken off." The bear whined softly as she probed the wound, but remained surprisingly cooperative. Theo watched in amazement. Luna clutched protectively against his chest. The mother bear and cubs were equally attentive, their eyes fixed on Olivia's careful movements. "This is going to hurt," Olivia warned, picking up her tweezers. "But it will feel better afterward, I promise." She took a deep breath, steadied her hands, and began the delicate process of extracting the metal fragment. The bear growled low in its throat as the tweezers probed the wound, but a soft sound from Luna seemed to calm it. The connection between his daughter and these wild creatures continued to astonish Theo. After several tense minutes, Olivia gave a small cry of triumph. "Got it." She held up a wicked-looking piece of metal, jagged and rusty. "No wonder you were in pain. This has been in there for a while." The bear immediately relaxed, sensing that the worst was over. It sniffed curiously at its paw, as if already noticing the difference. "Not done yet," Olivia said, reaching for the antiseptic solution. "This will sting, but it will prevent infection." Theo expected the bear to balk at this point. Even domestic dogs often struggled with the sting of antiseptic. But to his continued amazement, the bear allowed Olivia to clean the wound thoroughly, only occasionally twitching as the solution bubbled in the raw flesh. Finally, Olivia applied a generous amount of antibiotic ointment to the pad. "I'd bandage this if I could," she said, more to herself than to the bear. "But I don't think that would last long in the wild. The ointment will have to do." She released the paw, and the bear immediately pulled it back, examining the treated wound with evident curiosity. It placed the paw gingerly on the ground, testing its weight, then looked up at Olivia with an expression that Theo could only interpret as gratitude. Luna clapped her hands delightedly, babbling as if congratulating everyone involved. The bear cubs picked up on her excitement, bouncing around their mother and the newly treated adolescent in what looked remarkably like celebration. The mother bear rose to her feet, her massive form towering over Olivia, who was still kneeling on the ground. For a moment, Theo felt a flash of fear. Had they misinterpreted the entire situation? Was the mother bear about to attack now that the treatment was complete? But instead, the large bear dipped her head until her nose was level with Olivia's face. She sniffed deeply, memorizing Olivia's scent, just as she had memorized Luna's the day before. Then, in a gesture that left both humans speechless, she gently bumped her forehead against Olivia's, a brief, deliberate contact that felt unmistakably like thanks. The injured adolescent did the same, though more cautiously, then moved to where Theo stood with Luna. The bear rose up slightly, bringing its nose level with Luna's tiny hands. Luna reached out without hesitation, patting the bear's snout as if it were a large, friendly dog. Theo remained frozen, fighting every instinct that screamed at him to pull his daughter away from the wild predator. But there was no threat in the bear's demeanor, only a gentle curiosity and something that looked remarkably like respect. After this final exchange, the mother bear made a grunting sound that seemed to signal departure. The cubs immediately fell in line behind her, and the treated adolescent limped after them, already moving more comfortably on its healing paw. At the edge of the forest, the mother bear paused and looked back one last time. Her eyes met Olivia's, then Theo's, and finally Luna's. In that moment, a silent understanding passed between the two families, a rare connection across the divide that usually separated human from wild. Then the bears disappeared into the trees, the sound of their passage fading quickly in the dense undergrowth. Olivia stood shakily, brushing dirt from her knees. "Did that really just happen?" she asked, her voice unsteady. "Did I really just treat a wild bear's injury while its family watched?" Theo moved to her side, shifting Luna to one arm so he could wrap the other around his wife. "It happened," he confirmed softly. "All of it. And I don't think I'll ever be able to explain it to anyone." Luna, nestled between her parents, made a soft humming sound, the same sound she had used to communicate with the bears. But this time, there was a note of contentment in it, as if she was satisfied with the outcome of the extraordinary encounter. They stood there for a long moment, a small human family at the edge of the wilderness, forever changed by what they had experienced. The forest around them seemed different now, not a separate alien place but an extension of their world, filled with beings more aware and intelligent than they had ever suspected. "We should go inside," Theo said finally, glancing at the sky. "It looks like rain again." As they walked toward the cabin, Luna twisted in his arms to look back at the forest, her expression wistful. Olivia touched her daughter's cheek gently. "I know, sweetheart," she murmured. "I'll miss them too." Inside, as Theo built up the fire and Olivia prepared lunch, they tried to process what had happened. "Do you think we'll see them again?" Olivia asked, cutting sandwiches into small pieces for Luna. Theo shook his head slowly. "I don't know. What happened was unprecedented, miraculous even. I don't know if we should expect it to continue." "Luna thinks we will," Olivia said, watching their daughter, who was happily arranging her toy animals in a circle, bears prominently in the center. "She seems so certain." The rest of the day passed quietly, the extraordinary events of the morning settling into their consciousness like a dream half remembered. By evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the clouds in shades of pink and gold, it almost seemed possible that they had imagined it all. But Luna knew better. As darkness fell, and stars began to appear in the velvet sky, she pointed toward the forest and made her humming sound one more time. From the distant trees came a faint response, a low, rumbling call that could have been mistaken for the wind among the pines, if you didn't know what you were hearing. Olivia and Theo exchanged glances, a mixture of wonder and uncertainty in their eyes. Whatever connection had been forged between their daughter and the bears, it was real and ongoing. What it meant for Luna's future they couldn't begin to guess. As they tucked Luna into her crib that night, Olivia whispered, "Sweet dreams, my little bear whisperer." Luna smiled sleepily, her eyes already closing, but her hand reached out to touch the bear figurine Theo had placed beside her pillow, a small acknowledgement of her extraordinary gift. Outside, unseen in the darkness, 4 shadows moved at the edge of the forest. The mother bear paused, lifting her nose to catch the scent of the cabin and its inhabitants. Beside her, her cubs played quietly, and the adolescent tested its healing paw, finding it much improved after Olivia's treatment. For a moment, the large bear stood watching the lights of the cabin, a silent sentinel acknowledging the unusual alliance that had formed. Then, with a soft grunt to her companions, she turned and led them deeper into the woods, where they belonged, but not before casting one last glance at the small human dwelling, where a special child slept. A child who could speak the language of bears, who had bridged the ancient divide between wild and tame, who had shown that compassion needed no words to be understood. In the quiet night, two worlds had touched and recognized each other, forever changing both in ways that were only beginning to unfold. The storm clouds gathered once more on the horizon, but this time neither human nor bear faced it alone. A connection had been forged, stronger than fear, older than words. A reminder that in this vast wilderness we are all, in the end, simply trying to protect what we love. Morning dawned gray and misty, the forest wrapped in a gauzy veil that muffled sounds and blurred shapes. Olivia stood at the kitchen window, sipping her coffee and watching the mist swirl among the trees. Luna was still asleep, exhausted from the previous day's extraordinary events. Theo moved quietly around the kitchen, preparing breakfast, but his movements were distracted, his mind clearly elsewhere. "Do you think we should tell anyone?" he asked suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. Olivia turned from the window, considering the question. Tell them what? That our 10-month-old daughter can communicate with bears? That we helped treat an injured wild bear while its family watched? Who would believe us? "I know it sounds crazy," Theo admitted, setting down the spatula he was using to flip pancakes. "But what happened was real, Olivia, both times. And it feels important somehow. Like it shouldn't just remain our secret." "I've been thinking about that too," Olivia said slowly. "But I'm worried about what might happen if word got out. Scientists would want to study Luna. The media would turn it into a circus. And what about the bears? They could be captured, relocated, or worse." Theo nodded grimly, acknowledging the truth in her words. The modern world had little room for mysteries, for connections that couldn't be quantified and analyzed. What they had experienced existed in a realm beyond scientific explanation, and trying to force it into that framework would only diminish it, or destroy it entirely. "You're right," he said finally. "This stays between us, at least for now. When Luna is older, she can decide for herself whether to share her gift with the world." A soft cry from the nursery signaled that Luna was awake. Olivia set down her coffee cup and went to get their daughter, leaving Theo to finish preparing breakfast. When she returned with Luna, freshly changed and wide awake, she found Theo standing at the front door, a strange expression on his face. "Theo, what is it?" He beckoned her over without speaking. When she joined him at the door, she gasped in surprise. There, on the porch, lay a perfectly formed honeycomb, golden and dripping with sweet nectar. Beside it was a small pile of bright red berries, plump and fresh. "Are those gifts?" Olivia whispered, hardly daring to believe what she was seeing. Luna, spotting the offerings, let out a delighted squeal and reached toward them. There was no doubt in her reaction. She knew exactly where these things had come from. "I think they are," Theo replied, his voice filled with wonder. "Bears love honey and berries. They're sharing their food with us." Olivia stepped onto the porch and carefully picked up the honeycomb, marveling at its perfect hexagonal cells. "This isn't just foraged food," she said slowly. "This was deliberately placed here. It's a thank you." They looked out at the misty forest, searching for any sign of their ursine visitors, but the trees stood silent and still, revealing nothing of what might be watching from their shadows. Luna made her humming sound, and for a moment both parents thought they heard a distant response. But it might have been just the wind, or the creak of branches heavy with moisture. "We should accept the gifts," Theo said finally. "It would be rude not to." Olivia nodded and carried the honeycomb into the kitchen, placing it carefully on a plate. Theo followed with the berries, which he rinsed gently under cold water. "Do you think this is the beginning of something?" Olivia asked as they incorporated the unexpected gifts into their breakfast. Or the end? Theo considered the question as he drizzled the wild honey over the pancakes. I don't think it's either, he said finally. I think it's just a moment in time. A rare, precious moment when the boundaries between our worlds dissolved. Whether it happens again or not, we've been given something incredible. Luna, seated in her high chair, watched her parents with solemn eyes that seemed too knowing for her age. Then she smiled, a radiant expression that banished the gray of the misty morning, and reached for the berries Theo had placed on her tray. As they ate their breakfast, enhanced by the wild offerings, Olivia and Theo found themselves stealing glances at their daughter. Had she always been this way, they wondered? Or had something awakened in her during their time in the forest? And what did it mean for her future? These questions hung in the air, unanswered but not troubling. Whatever path lay ahead for Luna, they would walk it with her, supporting her unique connection to the natural world without trying to define or confine it. After breakfast, despite the lingering mist, they decided to take a walk. Not to seek out the bears, they understood instinctively that such encounters couldn't be forced or scheduled, but simply to be in the forest, to acknowledge and appreciate the world their daughter seemed so connected to. They dressed warmly against the damp chill and set out on the main path, Luna securely strapped to Theo's back once more. The forest was quiet, the mist dampening sounds and creating an atmosphere of hushed anticipation, as if the woods themselves were holding their breath. They walked in comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts about the extraordinary events they had witnessed. Luna, however, was alert and engaged, her eyes darting from tree to tree as if following invisible movements. They had been walking for perhaps half an hour when Theo suddenly stopped, his body tensing. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. Olivia paused, listening intently. At first, she heard nothing beyond the gentle patter of moisture dripping from the trees. Then it came to her, a distant sound of distress, a high-pitched keening that raised the hair on the back of her neck. "What is it?" she asked, instinctively moving closer to Theo and Luna. "I'm not sure," Theo replied, his voice tight with concern. "But it doesn't sound like a bear. It's too sharp." Luna, however, seemed to recognize the sound. She began to squirm in the carrier, making urgent noises and pointing in the direction of the distress call. "Should we investigate?" Olivia asked uncertainly. After their experiences with the bears, the idea of approaching another wild animal in distress didn't seem as outlandish as it once might have. But she was still acutely aware of the potential dangers. Theo hesitated, torn between caution and curiosity. "Let's get a little closer," he decided finally. But at the first sign of trouble, we turned back. They left the main path, following the sound through the misty forest. The ground was still soft from the recent rains, their boots leaving deep impressions in the mud. The keening grew louder as they approached, taking on a rhythmic quality that was almost musical in its desperation. Luna grew increasingly agitated, her small body practically vibrating with the need to reach whatever was making the sound. Her usual babbling had ceased, replaced by intent focus and occasional humming that seemed to answer the distant cries. Finally, they reached a small clearing where a massive old oak had fallen, its roots torn from the ground by the storm. The keening sound was coming from beneath the tangle of exposed roots and soil. Luna pointed urgently, making sounds of distress that mirrored whatever creature was trapped. Theo carefully set her down beside Olivia before approaching the fallen tree. "Be careful," Olivia warned, holding Luna tightly as she strained toward the tree. Theo nodded and cautiously made his way to the massive root ball. He crouched down, peering into the dark spaces between the tangled roots. At first, he could see nothing in the shadows. Then a pair of golden eyes blinked back at him, and the keening intensified. "It's a wolf pup?" he called back to Olivia, his voice tight with surprise. "It's trapped under the roots. The tree must have fallen during the storm." "A wolf?" Olivia repeated, instinctively pulling Luna closer. "Where's the rest of the pack?" As if in answer to her question, a long, mournful howl echoed through the misty forest, raising goosebumps on their arms. It was answered by several other howls, more distant but moving closer. "They're coming," Theo said urgently. "We need to get the pup out before they arrive, or they'll see us as a threat." Luna began to struggle in Olivia's arms, her face contorted with determination. She made the same humming sound she had used with the bears, but with a different pitch and rhythm, adapted somehow for this new creature. The trapped pup fell silent, listening to Luna's strange communication. Then it whined softly, a sound of both fear and hope. "She's doing it again," Olivia whispered in awe. "She's talking to it." Theo was already working to clear away smaller roots and loose soil, trying to create an opening large enough for the pup to escape. "I need something to pry these roots apart," he muttered, looking around desperately. Olivia spotted a broken branch nearby and passed it to him, still keeping a firm hold on Luna, who was growing increasingly agitated. Theo wedged the branch between two thick roots and leaned his weight on it. The wood creaked and bent, but didn't break. Slowly, the gap widened, revealing a small gray wolf pup with golden eyes, trembling but unharmed. The pup eyed Theo warily, clearly afraid to move toward the human, even though the path to freedom was now open. Luna made the humming sound again, louder and more insistent. The pup's ears perked up, and it looked directly at the baby with an intelligence that mirrored what they had seen in the bear's eyes. "It's responding to her," Olivia said softly, loosening her grip on Luna just enough that the baby could reach out toward the trapped animal. The pup hesitated for another moment, then suddenly darted forward, squeezing through the gap Theo had created. But instead of running away into the forest, it moved toward Luna, its small tail wagging slightly in a gesture that seemed more canine than lupine. Luna reached out a chubby hand, and to the parents' amazement, the wolf pup allowed her to touch its head, even leaning slightly into the contact. The moment was broken by another series of howls, much closer now. The pup's head snapped up, its ears alert. It gave Luna's hand one quick lick, then bounded away toward the sound of its pack, disappearing into the mist like a gray ghost. Moments later, the underbrush rustled, and a large female wolf emerged at the edge of the clearing. Her silver-gray coat was damp with mist, and her amber eyes held the same uncanny intelligence they had seen in the mother bear. Behind her, several more wolves appeared, their forms indistinct in the swirling fog. Theo moved swiftly back to Olivia and Luna, placing himself protectively in front of them. But Luna was unafraid. She made a soft sound of welcome, different from the ones she had used with the bears, but carrying the same sense of cross-species communication. The lead wolf, the mother, they assumed, stepped forward cautiously. Her eyes moved from Luna to the fallen tree where her pup had been trapped, understanding dawning in her gaze. The other wolves remained at the edge of the clearing, watchful, but not threatening. Then, from the mist behind the wolves, another shape emerged, larger, more massive. The mother bear lumbered into view, her cubs and the adolescent close behind her. "Oh my God," Olivia breathed, clutching Theo's arm. "They're all here, together." It was an impossible scene. Wolves and bears, natural competitors in the wild, standing in seemingly peaceful proximity. Yet there was no aggression between them, only a shared focus on the humans, particularly on Luna. The mother wolf approached the mother bear, and the two predators acknowledged each other with a brief exchange of scents. Then both turned to face the human family. Luna made a series of sounds, humming for the bears, a higher-pitched sound for the wolves, creating a bizarre symphony of communication that transcended conventional understanding. The mother bear grunted softly, and her cubs moved forward, approaching Luna without fear. The wolf pup that had been trapped darted from behind its mother to join them, and for a surreal moment bear cubs and wolf pup played together at Luna's feet, while the adult animals watched in what could only be described as tolerant amusement. Theo and Olivia stood frozen, witnesses to a gathering that defied everything they thought they knew about the natural world. It was as if Luna had created a temporary truce, a safe space where ancient enmities were set aside in recognition of something more important, a shared connection to this remarkable human child. The mother bear approached Olivia, and this time the woman found she wasn't afraid. She reached out slowly, allowing the bear to sniff her hand, before gently, tentatively, placing it on the massive creature's head. The bear tolerated the touch for a moment, then moved back, making room for the mother wolf to approach. The wolf was more cautious, keeping a slight distance but dipping her head in what felt unmistakably like acknowledgement and gratitude. One by one, each adult animal seemed to offer some form of recognition to the humans who had helped their young. Luna sat happily amidst the gathering, completely at ease among creatures that should have terrified her. She babbled and hummed and made her strange, musical sounds, and the animals listened as if she were speaking the clearest language in the world. "What is happening?" Theo whispered, his voice filled with wonder and confusion. "How is this possible?" Olivia shook her head, beyond explanations. "I don't know," she replied softly, "but I think Luna is showing us something we've forgotten, that we're all connected, more deeply than we realize, that barriers exist only because we believe they do." As the morning mist began to burn away under the strengthening sun, the strange gathering slowly dispersed. The mother wolf called to her pup with a soft yip, and after a final playful tumble with the bear cubs, it responded to the summons. The wolf pack melted back into the forest, visible for a few moments as gray shadows among the trees before disappearing completely. The mother bear lingered longer, watching Luna with those intelligent eyes that seemed to hold secrets beyond human comprehension. Her cubs played a final game of chase around the fallen tree, the adolescent watching with what looked remarkably like the indulgence of an older sibling. Then, with a soft grunt, the mother called her family together and led them away, back into the depths of the forest that was their home. Luna watched them go with a serene expression, as if their departure was expected and accepted. She reached up to Olivia, asking to be held, and nestled against her mother's chest with a contented sigh. "We should head back," Theo said softly, still processing what they had witnessed. "The sun's coming out,